So today we have one more session of our Living Theosophy. That is what our branch here, the Wheaton Alcott branch, organizes the public activity. And welcome all those who are watching us on the internet. As Michelle said, today we are going to explore one of the fundamental propositions of what Blavatsky called the secret doctrine. Before we go into this, if we look at our culture, we have like a linear perception of time, of processes for the most part. We think that history is progressing in a linear way. We think that in the past, people were less educated, less developed, and as we grow into the future, we evolve and we reach heights that were never reached on Earth. In the same way, we perceive that our life is linear, and probably that's a factor in our view that the old age is something that is not really valuable. You know, if we have a linear view, then the old age is the age that is close to the end. Why would we spend any effort, money, or, you know, in something that is about to end? In the past, that wasn't like that in many cultures. For example, the Greeks and many native cultures used to think that the old age was the age of wisdom. And because many people try to live their lives in a more meaningful way, they did have some wisdom when they got to the old age. But in our culture, because of our view, our linear view, we regard productivity as a value, and you can produce more when you are young. Therefore, when you are old, you know, you are not so valuable. That's the perception in general of our culture. This linear perception produces several problems. The fear of death, the fear of the future, our inability to learn from the past. You know, we always think as a culture that we are wiser than before. So what is the value in the past, or what is the value in our ancestors? So, you know, this view is very strong in the West, and unconsciously it's like taints or colors our view of life, of the universe, of these processes. Now, Theosophy postulates that progress is not really linear. Progress is cyclic. We can see cycles all over the universe. You know, physical cycles like the seasons or day and night, or even chemically speaking, we have the cycles of the elements. You know, the nitrogen is as an element, an atom in itself, then it gets in more complex molecules, it begins to form part of an organism, the organism dies, then there is a breaking down of the molecules, and you get again to the atom of nitrogen. That's, you know, the cycle of nitrogen or water or whatever. So we see that there is certain tendency in nature to this cyclicity. Then we talk about recycling, you know, and nature naturally recycles things. You know, that's the way how things can be recovered to be of use again. But then when we think of our life, when we think of our emotional, psychological, and even spiritual life, we don't think in terms of cycles. Blavatsky says in The Secret Doctrine that the law of cycle is universal, that everything in the universe follows a kind of cycle. She says the universe as a whole is eternal, but within this eternal ground, which we could call the absolute reality, innumerable universes appear and disappear in a regular ebb and flow of life. The current theory in science for the development of the universe, the Big Bang, usually doesn't take into account the idea of a cycle. There was a Big Bang, now the universe is expanding. It is expanding faster and faster. They don't know very well why. And what they think is that at some point the universe or things will get so much apart from each other that life will be impossible and the universe will dilute in some way. That's one of the views. But there is a new model that is beginning to gain some respect among scientists, which is the cyclic model of the universe. So they are saying actually the universe, begins, it expands, but at the same time there is a force that is tending to bring together the universe. So at a certain point the universe begins to implode, if we want to say like that, and it gets to a point where the universe begins to expand again, and then just like a heart, in a sense, expanding and contracting. They talk about brains or membranes, different dimensions. It's a complex theory, but the idea is that the universe is cyclic. And there are some scientific foundations for this idea. It explains better some things that the theory of Big Bang can't. Well, Theosophy and Hinduism and Buddhism and several traditions say that this is how things happen, that the universe is manifested, it lasts for a while, and then there is a state of dissolution, then a state of rest, and a new reawakening of the universe. And in the same way, what Theosophy postulates is that our own life follows the same pattern. So we begin our life, then we grow, we have a series of experiences, then our body decays, as everything in the universe, and then we go to a period of rest, so to say, to be reborn again into a cycle of activity. The reason why there are these cycles, in the Theosophical view, these cycles have a purpose. As we said, the only reality is the absolute. The absolute is beyond, we said this in our previous talk, the absolute is beyond evolution, is beyond change, because it is the reality in itself. Reality cannot change, otherwise it wouldn't be real. If it can change, it means that it's an appearance. So reality itself cannot change or anything, but the manifested universe is like a phase of this reality, and within the manifestation there is a whole process of differentiation, evolution, interaction, and within this frame, according to the Theosophical view, there is a purpose. There is a reason why we go through experiences in a cyclic way. And although from an absolute point of view, that reason doesn't affect, the reality, yet in what we call our universe, this reason seems to be a power that is moving everything forward to a particular purpose. So why is it that we go through cycles? As we are going to see in one of the following series, there is this idea of evolution. The idea is that only the absolute is perfect, and it is perfect because it is beyond forms. Every form is limited, and limitation itself makes it imperfect, because when we show one particular aspect, we are not showing other aspects. As I think I mentioned last week, if something is red, that means that it's not green. Or if something is cool, it means it's not hot. Every particular form is denying a series of characteristics that are not compatible with that form. So everything that is manifested is imperfect in a sense. When manifestation begins, there is a perfect idea of, for example, what a human being should be. These are called archetypes in the Platonic view, as Plato postulates, not so much the archetype as in Jung's theory. So the archetypes are like the perfect idea of what a human being or a tree or a planet should be. But when that archetype begins to manifest, then it gets very limited. And the process of evolution is a process where the form is trying to get as close as possible to the archetype, to the original idea. So this is a way in which we can see evolution. When we talk about evolution, we are going to deal more in detail with this. But for our purposes, the idea is that cycles are like reshaping of a form that is in development. So first there is like a general drawing, then there is a period of rest, and the next cycle takes that general drawing and perfects it a little. Then there is a period of rest, and again, so every cycle will perfect the form, the manifested form, a little more. And this is necessary because forms are, they need to be destroyed so that a new model can come. For example, we can see it even psychologically. We all, as humanity or as a culture, tend to be afraid of death. But if we see our life, as we go through life and have all different experiences, our mind begins to be conditioned by our remembrances, experiences, sad or good, our, the way we see the world. If there is not a change in what we call our personality, then we would become caught in a particular form that grows too rigid. So what death does is to destroy the form so that the essence that is inside in this process of development can start over from, not from zero, but can start over from the last model, rebuilding whatever was built in the past. It's just like our body. If our body is going to grow during our life, the cells need to die and be changed. So these cycles are necessary because forms are constrictions of life, and although they manifest the life, then they become a prison at certain point. So we have to break them down and start again from on a higher plane. So we see these cycles not only on the universal level, but also in history. We see, for example, empires that have grown, got to their apex, and then they degenerate, and they just disappear, or they stay in a state of vegetable life, in a sense. We have in the Middle East, there were great cultures there that were the intellectual leaders of humanity. In Egypt, we know a little about the ancient Egyptian culture and how they were really leaders of humanity in many aspects. But then the culture, not the people I'm talking about, just the culture as a force in the world. The culture goes to a cycle of decay or goes into rest, and a different culture appears, and now is the new leading force in humanity. And every culture goes through that every race, and this process of cycles can be seen also in humanity as a whole. In Theosophy, it is said that before we have records of our history, there were other civilizations that had attained a very high technological development. You know, all these ideas of Atlantis that Plato mentions a little in his books. So a culture or the whole humanity develops to a certain extent, then it decays and begins to disappear, only to be reborn in a new group. So today we are very worried about the future of humanity, and we don't know what is going to happen in the future, but at some point our whole, civilization will probably die away, and then a new civilization will be reborn hopefully on a higher level to a certain extent. So these cycles happen all over the universe. This is also important to keep in mind in our individual life, because as we go through our daily life, we also go through a series of cycles. Sometimes we are in a cycle in our life where it's very active. We have to do a lot of things, either take care of our family or at work or wherever we are. It is a period of activity. And we may resent that period, and we may wish to, have more rest or something else. But that is a period where we are supposed to try to do the best we can at that point. Then the cycle will be over, and a new cycle will come. Maybe it's a cycle of rest, where we don't have so much activity, where the idea of that cycle is more of introspection, of work on ourselves, for example. And as human beings, we usually resent the new cycle and wish the old cycle was still here, because we have this tendency to get attached to the past. It doesn't matter if it was good or bad. Somehow we manage to think it was better than now. So if we see that there are all these cycles constantly, and even within a big cycle of activity, we have the little cycles, where we have to be more active or less active, where we have the opportunity to work or we have to wait. All these cycles are always playing a part in our lives. So if we can see this, then we can try to work more to help the cycle and see, okay, where is life putting me now? What can I do with this? Instead of trying to, fight the cycle, what am I supposed to do here? How can I take advantage of this? Sometimes, a cycle will not allow certain things that we want at the time. Okay, so keep it there. Do whatever the cycle allows. Do it the best way you can. And then another cycle will come for you to pick up these other needs, for example. Or if we begin to see these cycles, then we can cooperate with them. So I think it is important, even with any psychologically, we go through cycles. There's times where we are very optimistic and full of energy, and then times where we are more mellow or without energy. Those are all normal things, because it's the way the cycles work. Now, the important point is, if you see how Blavatsky frames the second fundamental proposition, she begins by saying, the universe as a whole, in toto, she uses this Latin phrase, is eternal. Within that, we have all these cycles. That eternal reality is in ourselves. So we can choose, although our body, our emotions, our minds are all subject to cycles, our external circumstances, they are all subject to cycles. We can try to get to the center of our being, which is beyond all the cycles. That means if we can go through the cycles without being thrown away or here and there by the cycle itself, if we can get to this point of poise, that is like in the center of the cycle, therefore it's not moving, then we can work within the cycle in an intelligent way. If we cannot get to this core and then we are on the periphery, then we are in the chaos of the cycle or the motion of the cycle. So there is always in us that aspect of reality which is not being affected by the cycle. And that is part of what we have to learn. We have to learn to put ourselves there and from there live a particular cycle and not from the periphery. So the whole spiritual life and meditation, study, and service, all that should be a way for us to discover that center and a practice for us to come back to it, as much as possible. And that is the purpose of the cycles, to teach us what is immutable. Because we cling to things that are not real in the sense that they are not eternal. They are always changing. So we cling to something and that disappears. That produces suffering, but then we see this is not real. This will disappear. So we cling to something else and that will disappear. And at a certain point, consciousness begins to realize that we cannot cling to these things because eventually they change, they disappear. So little by little, consciousness begins to try to look for that is always there, that is eternal. So that is also one of the purposes of these cycles. It allows us to see what is not real and gives us a new opportunity. Okay, now do it again and see, how you can do it. And then a new cycle begins. Okay, with the experience gathered, start over and do it again. So that's more or less the idea of the cycle of incarnations. What in Theosophy we call the higher ego in the sense of the essence of I-ness, comes once and again or with a little more experience and tries to deal with, this physical reality and emotional and mental in a way that is more in tune with what really is. So we have all these psychological cycles, we have physical cycles, we have cycles in history and everywhere. And as we can see this in that way, we may be able to take more advantage of, the experiences, advantage from a spiritual point of view. So let me show you how this law of cycles work at the universal level. This will be something which will give us a background for when we explore evolution. So having talked about our daily life, let me show you how this process works at the universal level. Remember that we said in our last talk that the process of evolution or the process of manifestation of the universe produces 7 planes, 7 different dimensions. We are going to see these planes more in detail next week. But the idea is that we have reality in several dimensions. The lower, what we call the lower planes, are more concrete. What we call the higher planes are closer to this archetype. So we have what we call our Earth, our planet, which is obviously physical. It's, we can perceive it through our senses. And here, on this planet, we go through a process of evolution. Science knows a little about evolution. In the Theosophical view, as we are going to see later, is evolution is much more complex. But the idea in the Theosophical view is that this evolution of consciousness didn't begin here on our physical plane. The idea is that life develops from within or from the higher the highest to the lowest, and then from the lowest back to the highest. So there is a concept which I'm not going to develop in too much detail. I'm only going to mention it. There is a concept that evolution, the evolution of consciousness, goes through 7 stages, of which the Earth is the 4th. These are called rounds of experience. So the idea is that life begins on a very subtle and spiritual plane, and consciousness begins to develop there, and begins to get certain conditioning, which is at the same time a conditioning and also a form of expression. For example, if you have a window, the window allows you to see outside, but also it limits you how much you can see. So consciousness needs some matter through which express itself. This matter allows consciousness to express, but at the same time it limits consciousness. So the idea is that there is first a period of evolution that is on subtle planes. It's not visible, it's not physical. Once that first period is over, then evolution, consciousness, becomes a little more denser. Still, we are far beyond the physical plane. And there is there a period of, again, evolution. Once that is finished, it goes to the next stage, and we go all the way until we get to the physical planet. Once the evolution is over here, we go back to a subtler stage. So you can see that this is a cycle. And these 2 stages, we can call them just by letters. Let's say A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. So you can see that the evolution on the stage E and C, they are on the same plane. But the idea is that when we get to the same plane that we were before, but after all this experience, consciousness is able to develop much further than it was able to develop on the C stage. You know, so in the same way, consciousness goes all the way up to this highest plane where it began, and then there is a period of rest in between. I'm giving you just the general view because we are not talking really about evolution, but about cycles. We are going, during all this series, we are going to develop all these, further and further. But again, Theosophy is a lot about studying in cycles. It's better if you first get a general view, and then you put some more details on that view, and then more details. If you start trying to understand, every detail, is very difficult to grasp the general idea. So the planet itself goes through this, or consciousness through our planet goes through, all these cycles, different cycles. Once we are here on Earth, let us concentrate our sight here. Theosophy says that there are also cycles of evolution for humanity that are called usually root races. So these cycles around, these globes are called rounds for future reference. Now within each one of these globes, we have periods or cycles of evolution of humanity that are called root races. The word race is probably not the best definition for what they really mean, because in Theosophy it is said that we are the 5th root race. That means the 5th evolutionary cycle. So we have again, the first root race. We can make a graphic in this way. The second, then the third, then we have the 4th, which is usually, if you see the 4th element in this model, is the lowest. And then we have the fifth, sixth, and the seventh. Well, this is not really symmetric. I know that she wants me to do it in a more symmetric way. Okay. So let us say 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so the idea is that we are right now here on the fifth root race. Now, what this means is that we are on the fifth evolutionary cycle. The fourth root race, which Plato used to call the Atlantean root race, they were not people other than us. They were ourselves some millions of years ago, living and having our own evolution and culture and civilization. And now the whole humanity belongs to the fifth root race, or the fifth evolutionary cycle, which, as I said, is the same humanity as it was here, but we are in a new development. So these root races are not referring to ethnicity. They are actually, evolutionary cycles, as I said. So it is said that the fourth root race was the most concrete or most materialistic race. Now, in our cycle, we are just coming out of that strong materialism. It is said also that this race destroyed themselves. They got too much power, too little wisdom, and it's a little more complicated, the history, according to what Blavatsky says in The Secret Doctrine, but basically, we weren't wise enough to be able to protect ourselves and survive as a whole. So now we are in the fifth root race. As we all know and are aware, there is a chance that we may, destroy ourselves. And even if that happens, evolution goes on a further stage of development. And all this is like part of an order that is behind. That doesn't mean that we can do anything we want, and so everything will be okay, because we can go through all the different stages of evolution with more or less suffering. It's just like when we talk about the human life, a teenager, for example, we know that the life during our teen years will be more or less difficult, emotionally speaking, especially. Now, it can be very traumatic, or it can be, less traumatic. Every person has to go through the teen years where there is a psychological upheaval and a searching for who we are. That's a universal cycle, so nobody can skip it. But we can go through that, in a good way or in a bad way. So in the same way, humanity goes through stages that are known, that are defined. If you read, I think it is in the Rig Veda, they describe what is going on right now. They describe our culture, and they say, for example, they call, within this evolutionary cycle, again, we have different cycles. This is a question of cycles within cycles. We are within a big cycle here, and within this, we are in this cycle, the cycle of root races, and within our root race, we are also in cycles. In Hinduism, they call these cycles yugas. Yugas. And this is like the word ages. And they say there are 4 yugas that repeat themselves once and again. So they talk about the Krita Yuga, Treta Yuga, Dwapara Yuga, and Kali Yuga. This is like the Golden Age, the Silver Age, I guess, and the Bronze, and this is the Dark Age or the Iron Age. We are right now in the Dark Age in the Hindu chronology, which Blavatsky says is very accurate. So she usually used this chronology also. So within our race, we are going through this Kali Yuga. And as I was saying, in the Rig Veda, they say, during the Kali Yuga, you will know when the Kali Yuga is here because the people who are in power are not the wise people, are the people who want, to dominate, who are selfish, who are cunning, and as Plato would say, it's not the philosopher that will be the king or the president, but on the contrary, it's the opposite. It's the person that knows how to cheat or, So they say the Kali Yuga is an age where spirituality is removed, where the whole culture is pushing people away from spirituality, and therefore those souls that are not really strong, they are carried away. Because most people are still at a stage where they copy whatever the rest of their neighbors or their peers do. So many people would be spiritual if most people around were spiritual. And many people drink because everybody else drinks. Or many people, do things that are foolish, but because everybody does it. So that is Kali Yuga, when the influence of the age is pushing people who would not do something that is wrong, but is pushing them to do it because everybody else is doing it. So my point is that all these stages are predetermined in a way by those who know. They know what stages humanity will go through. As we know the stages of childhood, teen years, adulthood, and we know the general characteristic of them. But how we go through them is our responsibility. That is the idea. Although we have to go through a period like now where the mind seems to be the new God, and this idea that of the personal rights, it doesn't matter if I hurt somebody else, it is my right to do it, and I have to do it. All this particular period is something that is known to the sages. We are going through something that is natural, but our responsibility is to try to go through them, as I said, the best way that we can. And that is our role also in our family and friends and acquaintances. As far as we can, we could point out to what could be a better way to live. We can never be too pushy because people are what they are, not what we want them to be. But we can try to be an influence in certain direction so that as a whole, as humanity, we can go through these difficult stages in a healthier way. So the idea is that everything goes through cycles. Even though something may seem very difficult, has a purpose, if we do the best we can, then we are doing what we should do. What is expected from us is just to do the best we can. We cannot go against cycles. And the knowledge of this, I think, helps us at the level that we were talking about. So that's more or less what I wanted to share. Now we can open to comments and questions as usual.
Nothing on the internet.
Right.
Ed, start us off. Say something.
Give him the...
So let's talk a little bit about the root races. The root races, the way you're drawing, they also correspond to levels of physicality, mental, those seven. Mm-hmm. So the fourth root race was the most physical. We're not as physical mm-hmm. as the fourth root race?
Yeah. Actually, Blavatsky mentions that we could see this as planes, of, as Ed said, of physicality. And the first root race, the second root race, half of the third root race, according to Blavatsky, were not physical. The view in Theosophy is very wide. So when we talk about human beings of the first root races, they are nothing like what we conceive of as human beings. And these are stages in the process of consciousness to become more and more what we are now. And as you can see, what we are now is not the final product. We have further development. So the first root races, or consciousness of what is going to become a human, began when the Earth was still in a process of formation, with a very thin atmosphere and with all this upheaval that was going on with volcanoes and earthquakes. There was consciousness there, but not physical. No physical bodies could live in that environment. And yet, consciousness was beginning to develop in some way. Again, by consciousness, I don't mean self-consciousness. Self-consciousness is what we have right now, that we recognize ourselves as entities. These previous races were, for the most part, just as the fetus. The fetus is aware of the environment in a very, primitive way, if you want, but it is alive, it is aware that medicine has discovered that, and but we wouldn't say that it has an awareness as the one that an adult has. So in the same way, these previous races didn't necessarily have an awareness as we do. It is said that only halfway of the third root race, humanity developed this self-awareness. So the fourth root race is said to have been more physical. They were, in the Bible, in every sacred book, you have some account of titans or giants or, human beings that were far more stronger than we are right now. The idea is that these are like memories of our culture from the time where there was still certain interaction between the last remnant of the previous root race and this new root race. So all these titans were like the last remnants, as I said, of the fourth root race. And it is said that their bodies were much stronger and were built in a harder way, that it was really difficult to pierce them, with a spade or things like that. Yeah, so they were more physical. We are much weaker, physically speaking. And that's also something understandable because, for example, we have all this technology. All this technology allows us to do a lot of things. But the technology, the machines that we are using, because they are so complex, they are very delicate. If you have a wheelbarrow, you can throw whatever there and it will keep working. But if you have something, but it works only for that, it's a very basic, function that it has. If you develop something that is able to do many other things, necessarily becomes more complex, becomes more sensitive. So as consciousness develops, the organism becomes more and more complex and sensitive to be able to respond to the subtleties of consciousness. And therefore it becomes weaker. That's why we say that on this arc of evolution, matter becomes stronger and stronger. The organization of our bodies become, more firmly established, but then the consciousness that is within becomes imprisoned by it. So now in this arc where we are like going back to a state of spiritual existence, then the bodies begin to suffer, so to say, that kind of evolution. Bodies will be less and less strong in that way allowing consciousness to express better. So at certain point, you know, we will, not on this globe, because this globe is physical, but once we get to the 7th root race and we finish that cycle, evolution will become in the next globe, the next stage, and it's not going to be physical anymore. So you can see how the physical body begins to wane away.
Oh.
I remember reading that the fifth root race, the intellect, is that's what we're in now, is to strengthen the intellect, and not the physical. So there is a plan for each. There will be a plan for the 6th and 7th. We don't know what those plans are, but right now we're told that it's the intellect and the intelligence.
Yeah, I'll talk about that when we talk about evolution. But each one of these stages has, as I said, a purpose. It has the purpose of developing something in particular. So as a whole, you know, in these rounds around these stages, it is said that we are in the 4th one, and we are developing our emotional nature. Within the 4th stage, we are like in the 5th sub-stage, and we are developing our mind, but still within a process of development of emotions. So as humanity, we are very mature emotionally. We act as teenagers for the most part. You know, we like what that country has, and we invade it and take it. We are strong, we are bullies. We are not strong, then we try to trick people or countries, or, you know, it's pretty much like a high school, you know, in the world. So we are still in a process where we need to develop a deeper emotional nature, a universal emotional nature. And I think that's the source of our problems. And within that big cycle, we are developing our intellectuality, yes.
Is it possible to accelerate the process?
Yeah, that's a good question. This is like the general process, you know, the general pace. Now, within all this, people can grow faster or slower. There are certain things that cannot be changed. For example, all our bodies belong to the 5th root race. The bodies of the 4th root race were taller, as I was saying, and stronger, and those bodies don't exist anymore. So we are all in 5th root race's bodies. Now, the consciousness that is there can be developed as the mass of humanity will be in the 7th root race, or it can be developed as humanity was in the 3rd root race. You know, each individual goes through his or her own process of evolution. So right here in the 5th root race of our bodies and our culture, you have people from the different root races. And they say even from different rounds. There are people who, for example, in Theosophy, they say that Plato was a person that, or as Plato was, the mass of humanity is going to be in the next round. Round, remember, is this. After humanity goes from here to globe E, D, G, the rest, A, B, C, and we come back to Earth. That's how most humanity will be, as Plato was. So Plato sometimes is said to be a 5th rounder, you know, a person as we are going to be in the 5th. So yes, every person can be at a different stage of evolution of consciousness.
Okay, we have some questions on the internet. One is, if the civilization is destroyed, what becomes of our souls?
Yeah, that's a good question also. As I said, the souls, what can be destroyed is only the forms. The Atlantis was destroyed, but the souls that were animating the Atlanteans are the same that are animating us here. We were part of the Atlantean race. So the souls, even, you know, in the Bible, they have this story of Noah, and that some species were saved to begin again after the universal deluge. Well, that's a symbolic teaching of what really happens. There is always a core of humanity that can survive, and out of that, a new civilization is developed, which is something also necessary. You know, we got to a point where we developed the atomic bomb and a lot of knowledge that we are not mature enough to handle. We may, let's hope we are, but we keep increasing our knowledge, and if we are not spiritually mature, we can destroy ourselves with that knowledge. So if that happens, the next humanity begins again from, you know, zero or very little technological knowledge, but that will give the opportunity to consciousness to grow before the intellect becomes again too strong, you know. And so the souls are always beyond the forms, and even if the forms are destroyed, the souls will keep incarnating. That is part of a law. That's the idea of the second fundamental proposition. It's part of a law. You know, I had a teacher in the university, and he used to say that because we men use, you know, this underwear that is tight, so the sperm is not needs to be cooler to, you know, to develop. So he said that the underwear was going to, you know, kill the race because we will become, you know, sterile. And I always thought, you know, these universal laws or the angels that are, you know, leading these laws with an underwear saying, okay, this threw off our plans. The point is that the universe has an order that not even us can screw up. We can screw it up for a little while, but the universe has a, you know, stronger order.
Shakes things loose.
Yeah.
All right. Second question: Why do we people and animals eat each other to survive and live to learn about what is real? Why was it not designed in a smarter way by such a smart one?
Mm-hmm. Well, maybe it was smart. It is said in the Secret Doctrine that at the beginning of evolution, animals and human beings were becoming more and more dense and concrete as they ate each other, you know, in a sense. I'm putting, a subject is a little more complicated, but to give an idea, with the emanations or the rests of, you know, a semi-physical humanity, animals would become more dense and then humans. So there was there a cycle also of becoming more and more dense. Also, at certain point in evolution, we may need to, you know, when the environment was so difficult, human beings couldn't possibly be, you know, very peaceful beings. Otherwise, the difficulties of the environment would have, you know, wiped out the race. And it is known that when we eat animal meat, we acquire that aggression in a sense, you know, which at certain point of evolution is necessary. But then naturally, we are talking about this when we are becoming more and more physical. So everything at this point, everything that increases our physical strengths and our you know, passions and all this aspect is good for evolution because it's trying to generate a very solid vehicle of consciousness. Now, once we get here, now there is no use in trying to become, you know, stronger or more physical. Things change. So now we have to become subtler. So maybe now it's not good to eat animals or many other things. You know, there have been many saints that ate meat. It is said that it's usually useful for a person not to eat meat because that increases the things that the person is trying to get away from, and also because of a question of compassion. But the idea is that at certain point of evolution, something is desirable, And at certain other points, something is not desirable any longer. So now it may seem foolish, certain things that were useful at a point. But, you know, it's just like if you have a baby, a cradle would be good for the baby, but then you grow older, and if you are in a cradle, that would be a, you know, stupid limitation. You don't need it anymore. But that doesn't mean that at the beginning wasn't useful. Now, if we are adults and are still, you know, sleeping in a cradle, then we would say, my parents were really foolish in putting me here in a cradle, you know. No, they were wise at the time. The foolish are ourselves that don't know that we have to step out of it.
Okay, the number 7 seems to repeat in the schema. What is its significance? Does HPB go into the significance or reason of these cycles and planes? That's a whole lecture.
Yeah, we talked about that last week, and we are going to talk about that more in detail in our next talk. It is about the 7 principles of man and cosmos, so of human beings and cosmos. So I will leave it for the next week.
Okay, and then just a clarification, aren't we the 5th root race of the 4th round?
Yeah, that's what I meant. We are in the 4th round, developing, you know, what we could call our emotions, and within this round, we are the 5th root race, developing our mind, our intellectuality. Again, we are going to see all this more in detail. Yeah, then there are subroot races, you know, and again, we have within this that we talk about, you know, we have here also cycles, and within this we have also cycles. The secret doctrine calls it wheels within wheels. There are cycles within cycles. So a root race has also different sub-races, and right now we are, if you take the root race, you know, and ask, okay, how far are we in the evolution of the 5th root race? We are in the 5th sub-race. So again, we need to go through the 6th and 7th, and then the 6th root race will appear. Now, the times that Theosophy postulates are very wide. It's not that the next root race will be here in 100 years or even in 1,000,000 years. You know, it's really a very slow process.